Few regions have endured as much turmoil as the Middle East. Decades of violence and armed conflict have left deep scars. And the ongoing situation in Gaza and Lebanon and now Syria once again show that these tensions remain unresolved. Yet there are glimmers of change, but whether this leads towards resolution or deeper discord still remains to be seen. Today in War Diplomacy, we're going to take a deeper look into the struggle of power in the Middle East. So welcome today to War Diplomacy, a podcast where we explore and analyze geopolitics and the complex world of international affairs. Today, we're going to delve into the power dynamics in the Middle East and focus on three major players, that being Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, and analyze the ongoing situations in Gaza, in Lebanon, and the latest developments we have seen coming from Syria since the fall of Assad's regime. So to analyze this interesting topic, we're joined today by Alicia Pavia, Associate Director at the Atlantic Council. Alicia, how are you today? And thanks a lot for joining us.
Hi, Fabio. Thanks so much for having me on this call.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. And I think that today's conversation will be really, really interesting. We're going to focus on these power dynamics among the regional players and these contrasting visions. So just to make sure that we give its proper emphasis on all of them, we're going to divide the content in three blocks. In the first one, we're going to focus a bit more on Israel and delve into these recent campaigns against Hamas and Hezbollah, and of course, these recent incursions into Syria. In the second one, we're going to take a proper look into this rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran and examine these opposing perspectives and their different visions for the Middle East. And finally, we're going to turn our attention to Syria and discuss these ongoing developments and everything surrounding the fall of Assad and its implications for the broader region. So I think that this episode is to lay out the key players and dynamics in the shaping the Middle East. I'm sure we can properly examine each one of them along 2025. But Alisa, let's dive into the first block and examine how Israel is developing with these ongoing crises. So Israel has long been a central figure in the Middle East geopolitical landscape, but this recent news since the Hamas attack of last year have significantly changed and shaped Israel's domestic and international strategies. Internally, its leadership, Netanyahu, it's facing a lot of protest and some backlashes because of judicial reforms. And externally, there's also a mounting pressure because of this ongoing war in Gaza and the incursion against Hezbollah in Lebanon, which underscore Israel's complex regional challenges. So how do you feel Israel has been doing lately? Would you consider that it's as stronger as it was a couple of years ago? Or how would you assess the situation towards Israel?
There are two things to note when it comes to Israel. So one is the way that Israel has been able to wage these wars and where it has come to today after October 7. But one is also to remind ourselves and remember where Israel started off from. And so while many may think that the regional landscape has changed in many ways in some aspects, and we can look at that in a second, in other ways, the regional landscape actually has not changed as dramatically as we thought it would. So if we look at the region before October 7, Israel was engaged in talks with Arab countries through what we call the Abraham Accords. And these accords led to peaceful agreements between Israel, Bahrain, the UAE, Sudan, and Morocco. And what this means is that these four Muslim majority or Arab countries have come into agreements with Israel and therefore recognized Israel as a country. And this was a very important development for the region. And, many look at the October 7 attack as a way to upend these relations and put a dent in them and bring the Palestinian cause to the forefront again. And there were predictions that these agreements would fall, right? Because as a consequence, Israel then waged its war on Gaza, which brought tensions within the regions and the people. So if we remember, like in 2000s, where there was the Intifada happened, countries like Morocco withdrew its ambassador and its support to Israel, right? So many predicted this would happen again, but it did not. The Abraham Accords did withstand the war, and this shows that the countries in the region are a lot more eager, or at least the elites of these countries in the region are a lot more eager to maintain that strategic relationship with Israel, which says, a lot about what we can expect in the future. And so right now, analysts and experts are kind of on the lookout for what Saudi Arabia is going to do. And there is a potential for Saudi Arabia to also recognize Israel in the coming future. So that's what I would say hasn't really changed, right? Like the Abraham Accords are intact. Israel, and with the help of the US, continues this path of diplomacy. On the other hand, though, militarily, things have changed because as Israel has waged its war as a response to October 7, we've also seen that Israel has expanded its territorial lines. And so in Gaza, Israel is maintaining some positionings in the north of Gaza. In Lebanon, it withdrew, but there might be a sort of buffer zone. In Syria, Israel has also intervened militarily and is intended to stay there for some time, it has said. And so Israel's borders are changing. And if we look at Israel's past, once they occupy a specific land or piece of land, they tend to stay. So there's reason to believe that Israel is expanding its territorial landscape, its borders, and that as a consequence, some have argued that Israel is becoming a new regional hegemon to be reckoned with because it has basically outmaneuvered or won the war against all its opponents if one looks at the war on Hezbollah, the war on Iran, and then the war with Hamas.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And another new element that's coming is the new U.S. administration and how Trump is likely to bolster support for Israel and possibly provide even more leverage for Netanyahu. Do you think that with the Trump administration coming, how do you think this could shape Israel's approach to the ongoing conflicts? Maybe talking about Gaza, because as you've said, the situation in Lebanon might become a bit more stable with this ceasefire. And still not sure if it's going to hold or not. But do you think that Trump coming into power is going to change the way Netanyahu is behaving in the region?
I don't think it's going to change his behavior. I think it's going to bolster it in the sense that Netanyahu has always said he's wanted to annex the West Bank. And by the judging of the appointments that Trump has made to U.S. ambassador to Israel, so Huckabee. This is a person who has said in the past that he wanted to see the West Bank annexed to Israel and doesn't believe that the Palestinian people can be called as such. We can expect Israel's borders to expand more and for Israel to be annexing part of the West Bank. I think I say part because it's not realistic to expect Israel to expand and include all of the West Bank because there's an enormous cost to that, economical cost, and there's the question of what to do in terms of the people inhabiting that land. But Israel has been pursuing for years, decades actually, a expansion when it comes to the settlements right on the border with the West Bank because it sees that territory as its own. And so it's likely and it's reasonable to believe that those territories right on the borders between the West Bank and Israel will be annexed. And Trump will support that and allow that. And so I think that is what we can predict for now.
Yeah, and still recent developments might change. So who knows? Things might move around a lot in the coming weeks, months. So Alisa, now if we focus our attention into this dynamic between these other two principal regional players, Saudi Arabia and Iran. I mean, these two countries having locked in a rivalry that has defined Middle Eastern geopolitics for decades. Both of them vary their influence through their different ideologies, alliances, and strategies. And it's true that last year there was this reapproachment brought by China which signaled maybe the beginning of a cautious but significant improvement of their relations. Of course, that this is less about mutual trust and maybe a bit more about pragmatism, as both countries try to achieve their national and regional ambitions. However, as we are discussing these recent developments and Israel's campaigns against Hamas and Hezbollah in Gaza and Lebanon might complicate this dynamic. So first, maybe focusing in Saudi Arabia and its 2030 vision, this strategy of reshaping the Middle East. How do you think Saudi Arabia is asserting its influence across the Middle East? Do you think that the recent developments might change the way its strategy?
Like you said, the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia is decades old, and the rapprochement was a positive development, yet it was still a very delicate one, one that is too soon to tell whether it will withstand time. What happened with the Gaza-Israel war did impact Saudi Arabia and Iran massively, and it also impacted their relationship to an extent. And so what we saw was a Saudi Arabia that was in a very difficult position to have to balance its support for the Palestinians, but also want to maintain that open dialogue with the Israelis. At the end of the day, their major allies, Bahrain and UAE, have both entered into agreement with Israel. And so Saudi Arabia, compared to the past, has been a lot more cautious in terms of criticizing Israel and complaining about the Israeli incursion in Gaza. Iran, on the other hand, has been actively engaged in the war through its proxies, Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. And these, for the audience that isn't so aware of what these proxies are, they are military groups that are directly supported and directly funded by Iran and that have been attacking Israel since October 7. These two countries have dealt with the Gaza-Israel war in very different ways. At the end of the day, though, we didn't see, they have an ideological similarity in the sense that they both sustain the Palestinian cause, but that similarity historically has not been one that has been strong enough to unite countries. And so even in this case, we haven't seen a sort of unified stance by these two countries, even though there was a rapprochement a year ago. Going forward, at the end of the day, when we look at the Abraham Accords, those accords, many experts say that they were mostly done in a way to counter and contain Iran, right? So there's no real ideological communal thinking behind it that binds together all the countries to Israel. It's really a pragmatic way to contain Iran. And so there was a dual effect in the sense that the Saudis tried a dual approach in the way that the Saudis wanted to also maintain that dialogue with Iran, but it's quite clear that their engagement is more about containing Iran rather than dialoguing with Iran.
On the other hand, I think that Iran's again against the wall, facing a really complex and set of challenges after decades of sanctions, crippled economy. Iran has still demonstrated remarkable resilience and ability to still wield its influence far beyond its borders, with these supporting proxy groups, as you've mentioned, in zones such as Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, in Yemen with the Houthis, and Gaza, of course. However, this network has been quite impacted. This so-called axis of resistance has been severely damaged. And with the fall of Assad in Syria, a crucial ally for the regime in Tehran, this ability to influence the region might be greatly affected, right? How do you think this could change the way Iran is trying to assess its influence across the region? Do you think some people say Iran might be finished, and then with the maximum pressure that might come from the Trump administration, things might be even harder? Do you think this changes the way Iran is behaving or will behave in the coming years?
Thinking that Iran is finished, I think, is a bit naive. Iran has withstood many worse blows to itself and managed to come out of it intact. I see this as a time of momentary retreat, but Iran is a regional superpower that also holds significant leverage on the world stage, especially given its ongoing pursuit of gaining nuclear powers. This has worried the region and the entire world for many, many years, and it will continue to do so. When it comes to Trump's maximum pressure campaign, he implemented this in 2018 as well, in his first presidency when he withdrew from the JCPOA. And what that caused was Iran pursuing an even more aggressive nuclear program. And so Iran is this country that it feels that it is being isolated and that it is targeted. It is the only country in the region that is Shiite majority. As you said just now, I mean, it has received a significant blow. If Trump were to continue with his maximum pressure campaign, which he said he will, the fear is that Iran will retreat even more and then want to continue its efforts to gain those nuclear capabilities that has put Iran on the world stage and made it as powerful as it is.
Absolutely. And another thing that comes to my mind, maybe a topic for further discussion down in 2025, is this association we've seen among Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China. I've read somewhere they called it this axis of evil and how they are supporting each other in their different conflicts. So as well, maybe isolating Iran in this way might push the country even closer to these other countries. And I think that's a really interesting topic as well. I think it deserves a proper episode on that. But I think it's an interesting way that events impact each other, and that brings me to the last block and the last topic that I wanted to discuss here with you, which is the latest developments in Syria. And I think it's a great example of how the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine, in Gaza and Lebanon impacted the way that Assad's traditional allies could not allow to support him in that way, and it in a way allowed the rebel offensive to take him down, and well, for him to take a flight and escape the country to Moscow. So I wanted to ask you a bit about that. What factors you think? What other factors do you think that led to this quick and swift collapse of his regime? And I don't know, like, how do you think that this could also impact the dynamics in the Middle East?
Yeah. So what we witnessed in Syria was absolutely outstanding. Within 10 days, 1 week, we saw the collapse of Syria's ruling family that have been in place since the 50s in Syria. And so within a week, we saw really something outstanding done by these rebel groups. And that really showed how much the Assad family, Syria in general, were in the place they were thanks to external support, mainly by Iran and Russia. Once that support dwindled, Syria the family was unable to withstand against the rebel groups. How did we come to this? Well, Russia is engaged in its own war against Ukraine. Russia has lost an exorbitant amount of soldiers. They're heavily involved in that on that front. And they did not expect to be where they are right now. They expected to be able to annex vast parts of Ukraine by now. Putin is involved in that war and made a concerted decision that he was unable to help the Syrian people to the extent that he was in the past. And similarly, Iran, just like we said, was engaged in this brutal war against Israel. Israel was able to basically eliminate the heads of Hezbollah and decapitate, some of Iran's most important commanders. And so what that meant was that Iran was also had its hands full with another regional war and did not have that capacity to help Syria. And so the rebels saw that and they took advantage of the situation. And they gambled and they made the right decision because now they are the ones in charge. So right now what we have in Syria is this group called HTS. They are a rebel group that have ties or have its roots in Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And so now what's going to be interesting is going to be see how the international community decides to approach the relationship with the group.
Absolutely. I think that its leader, Al Jolani, has really tried to make this rebranding of his ideology, the way that he portrays himself. There's a lot of talk recently, I've heard, of his resemblance to Zelensky, and I think that's a lot on purpose, maybe not just the beard, but as well the way he's dressing, the way he's addressing the international media as well. But again, let's see how the US international community changes its status. I think that HTS is still considered as a terrorist organization. So these are things that impact the way that the international community can how they can relate to it. So let's see. There's as well other couple players in the area. There's the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, which is pretty much composed by the Kurds. There's the Syrian National Army as well. That's pretty much a proxy of Turkey, and all of them now have to maybe start making those negotiations, share power. But a lot of discussions are being are in the air lately. If it's going to be able to be for it to be a negotiation, some people say that this might just break apart. Tensions might arise, and we'll see the continuation of the war. Do you think that there's any possibility of a pact among these different factions, and we could see as a new Syrian government, plural and open, flourish?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. The conversation was that, HTS and the rebel groups in general, before starting the campaign, they had already come into agreement with many of the other rebel groups. The biggest challenge will be to see what they do with the Kurds, because the two groups stand on vastly different ideological terms and programs. And there have been clashes as well between the two between the region, the Kurds and HTS. Internationally, though, what's interesting is that at the end of the day, the Western powers have much to gain from the fall of the Assad regime. And so Western powers will be more eager rather than less eager to work with whoever is on the ground in Syria, right? And so we know that this was a big blow to Iran and Russia, and consequently then Western powers, let's say, have much to gain with the fall of the Syrian regime. That said, then it'll be up to the rebel groups to decide how they govern over the territory, and whether they will want to be, in fact, more moderate compared to others. We've seen that there have been signs of wanting to go in that direction, but and it's also in their interest to do so, because they also understand that they have the support of the West in Syria right now, and that it brings a certain amount of an important stance for the rebel group as well. And so they will probably see that. And so the prediction is that, my sense is that they will try to be more lenient and more moderate than other groups. European countries have already moved in direction of opening to dialogue to HDS. I think it's only a matter of time that the US does so as well, because it is in their interest at the end of the day, because now a country like Russia is deciding whether it needs to withdraw its military base or not, and that gives an entry point to a country like the United States and its European allies, if they so wish to have a more important role in that country.
Again, it's a really fascinating topic, and still a lot of uncertainty how things might develop. Hopefully, these frictions between the different factions do not end up in another conflict, and then more suffering for the Syrian population, which has endured a decade of suffering. And last thing I wanted to mention is how many different media outlets have said that Meloni was the winner of the year. The Time magazine said that Trump was the winner of the year. But to be honest, I feel like Erdogan was the geopolitical winner of 2024. And with this late victory in Syria, I think that his stance geopolitically in the Middle East has never been this good. And I think he will truly be able to maybe shift and shape the panorama now with the rebels, which he supported, now taking over power in the country. So I think that Turkey will definitely play an interesting role in the coming years. But I don't know how you see his stance on the region.
Yeah, you're right. This was a strong victory for Erdogan, for Turkey. There's also something else that's been happening on the backdrop, which is the Turkey-Egypt rapprochement. So the two countries have come closer together right now, even in the wake of the Gaza-Israel war. And there's a potential for this rapprochement to be resolved and for the two countries to be closer together than ever before. The two countries had stopped all diplomatic ties since 2013, since the ousting of the Muslim Brotherhood, because we know that, Erdogan has ties and links to the Muslim Brotherhood, and so he saw that ousting in Egypt as a threat to his identity as well. And so, but we've seen that al-Sisi and Erdogan are now again diplomatically engaged, and that has strengthened Turkey significantly as well.
And Alice, I think that with this, we can wrap up this really insightful episode. Again, talking about the geopolitics of the Middle East, we could be talking here for hours. We really try to maybe just touch that main narrative, the main actors, and the crises that we're seeing lately. I think that in 2024, this has been the main region of geopolitical friction. And I'm sure that in 2025, things won't be as calm as they used to. I feel things are going to get a bit more complicated as time moves on. So again, thanks a lot for your time, and happy holidays as well. It's been a pleasure to have this discussion with you, Alisa.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine.